Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy and welcome to a new video. So today I'm gonna show you how I made my Bigtime Techno to Ableton template. So basically this template have been made during my live stream on my other channel, Audio React. So if you haven't subscribed, you can go and subscribe if you don't wanna miss the next one. And today I'm gonna explain you in detail each element, why I picked them, the sound design about it and the MIDI notes. And next week we will talk a bit more about the arrangement, the mixing and the mastering part. All right, let's have a listen to see how it sounds.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, as if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now.
So if you want to listen to the full version, I will put the link in the description. You can go on my website and listen to the full track. You can as well, if you want to grab the template, go there and grab it this way. So let's get started. So the first track we have here, it's a sidechain. So basically it's a 909 clap that I'm using to trigger all of my sidechain compression. So you might wonder why I use this rather than the kick drum. The problem with the kick drum is, like, for example, some part of the track here, the kick is not playing, but I still want my sidechain, so I cannot use the kick. So I use always a clap or any kind of high percussive element. This way I don't need to bother if the kick is gonna play or not. I just put this, and I use it as well to kind of color code the different part of the track here. So this way it's easier for you to understand as well. You can visualize the arrangement in a better way and easier way to understand it better as well. So first we have our kick low, which have basic 4-4 to the kick, except at one point we have a little bit of variation. You're gonna see it's coming from this part here, so you can hear so you could use a tom or whatever. I rather use the same kick and I'll just play at a lower velocity, so you get this kind of effect, and it doesn't really affect the rumble neither so much, so that's fine. The kick is just, I just use a sample from my Bigtime library. And then in terms of rumble, so you can see I use my kick verb rag, which is a rag basically I designed to kind of create easily rumble, either with delay or with reverb. And the other day I found out that using a bit of both kind of creates an interesting thing, so I create a new rack as well, which is kind of double rumble, double treble, where both these racks are grouped together. And if you listen, you have first the reverb one. So you get your reverb offbeat because of the pre-delay of the reverb. But you can have as well a delay one. And I like this one, but you don't have the same rumble cavernous feeling than the reverb. So when you put both together, like the delay is more like a kind of aggressive offbeat rumble, and the reverb is more like a cavernous rumble, but it's kind of less aggressive than the delay. So having both, kind of having the best of both worlds. And this is another one of my rack with kick punch. It's basically just a parallel processing where you have some distortion and EQ just to affect the top high, and a bit of reverb, and it's just kind of adding a click to your sound. See, you don't barely hear the reverb, and it's just like to help you kick cut through the mic basically. So if I put, it's not a huge difference, and then I just have a look at, get rid of everything under 30 Hz, and the limiter I don't think it's working here anyway. And then with the second part we have our sub perc, which is basically a loop that I used, and I process it a little. That was the original loop. And I'm wondering if I didn't. I think I shortened, I kind of modified the original loop. But anyway, the idea is to have something offbeat. Yeah, it kind of creates a nice movement, and then we will see later with the bass as well, it really adds this extra groove and a bit of cohesion as well. Now we move into the hats. So that's the whole pattern. So we have first cloud I had. So first I use my drum rack hats rack. It's a rack I've created basically with some presets simpler inside, and you can see I map already the GK. You have some reverb GK as well you can control. You can control the detune of the ride. It's kind of to make my life easier. So this way I just have to drop some sample and I can already modulate the GK of my hats or the pitch of the ride. And we have this one, which is basically, you have the cloud I had, which is offbeat, which have a stronger velocity than the one which is the same on the beat. And you can hear there is a bit of delay as well. So this is because you can see here I can send in C and it's going in this delay. So all of this is included in the rack. You can grab it. All of the rack that I will show in this video, they are all available for free on my channel. You just have to go to the video related to the rack and you go in the description and you can find the rack and download it. And yeah, in terms of process, you can see that it's plainly, there is no processing. The thing is with this library, my Mixdown Techno sample library, all of the samples are like kind of heavily processed. So most of the time you won't really need it to process that much, you know, maybe just the EQ or, but sometimes no. You can see the second cloud I had is the same. So this one is more like a 16 classic cloud I had pattern. You see it's here. And they usually play both together, so that's our cloud I had pattern. And then you have the open. So nothing special to say about the open hats. One thing I like to do sometimes is to set the attack as 20 milliseconds. So this way you don't have a percussive hats, but you have like a more kind of aspiration, if you can say so. Kind of give a driving effect to your open hats, especially when it's half beat. It's really nice. So that's how it sounds. And you have the second one. They are most of the time playing together, just except at the intro, and it's exactly the same idea, having the attack at 20 milliseconds, so this way you get this aspiration effect. Both in terms of process, they don't have much. It's just saturation to add some harmonic, EQ to get rid of frequency. I didn't want it. And the open hat, I think I put it's the same process, you can see, and just I put it stereo. So this basically is a delay device that I use as a hash effect. Basically the hash effect is to have a delay where you have one side of your signal slightly delayed to the other one. So this way you kind of trick your brain to make it believe that there is actually two sounds when there is just one, they are just like slightly delayed. And then it's just some sidechain compression. So sidechain compression, I will come back to it when I will talk about mixing, but it's just basically this pumping ducking effect. And then we have our ride. So the ride is playing, so open hat, sorry, I didn't talk about the MIDI, but they're just playing offbeat classic. And the ride, you have this progressively crescendo velocity, which kind of gives this driving effect. This takata 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 effect. And with the strongest one offbeat, obviously, the one with the strongest velocity offbeat to really have this impulsion. And in terms of process, it's the same. Saturation, EQ, usually you have a resonance frequency, so it depends. Sometimes I will remove it, sometimes I will leave it, because sometimes these resonance, they are annoying, but sometimes they kind of add the character of the ride as well, so you have to be careful, don't always remove them, but yeah, in that case, I didn't want it. And just a bit of reverb. So I will talk about a bit more the reverb in the mixing process and sidechain as well. And yeah, that's mainly our drum. So, and yeah, and then after that, there is the overall process. So I like to use the drum bus. Just kind of make everything tied together and more cohesive, I don't know. I always use the soft mode for most of the time I use the soft mode with a bit of drive. I use the compressor, add a bit of crunch. I like to use the transient in a negative way, because this way it's kind of removing a little bit the, you kind of have the advantage of having your hats in the kind of wide reverb, you know, like with they are really breathing, but without having the disadvantage of having a long tail, we can be messy to your mix. So the transient kind of reduce the tail, and then you have the second hat. So basically this hat's supposed to be like originally supposed to be playing in the rest of the track, but here I actually just use it for the break part. You can see it's just playing during the break, and it's just to add an extra noisy hat layer, which kind of gonna add a bit of tension during the break. So it's just a loop that I've used. Not super important, there is absolutely no processing, but it's just this extra noisy layer during the break, which help a lot. So then we have our bass line, which is kind of a classic rolling bass line, and initially was just like one mono. So I'm gonna start and consider if it was just one mono. And I basically use my peak time synth. So basically it's a kind of synth that I originally created with operator, and you basically have like the 4 different oscillator playing along with 3 sawtooths and the noise. But initially in the original rack, they are slightly detuned, so you get this kind of super slow buzzy effect. Here I just remove the detune kind of effect, and I removed the reverb and the delay as well because I didn't want it. But here, if you want to find out more about the rack, I will put the link in the description. I'm not gonna re-explain again everything, but here EQ is really important, because depending where you put your low cut, basically it's gonna enhance kind of the frequency and gonna give a nice character. You're gonna see there is a couple of other sound in the track that really have this trick as well. And then this fast sync is a rack I created just to make things super loud. Again, if you want to find out more, it's just distortion, drum bus, and multiband compression. I will put the link in the description. But it's your classic sawtooth going through a low pass filter with a plucky envelope, you see, and that was great. The sound, the note is a 16, you can guess. You have G sharp A. So basically it's one semitone difference, but at a different octave, and it kind of creates this nice feeling. If I was putting at the same note but an octave upper, it's kind of different, but having, I don't know, it's just work well. Alright. And then you got some heavy sidechain compression and a bit of reverb, because I didn't want it to use the delay and the reverb that are initially in this rack. And you can see it's kind of a short reverb. Initially it was a bit too long, but was kind of getting messy, so kind of shortened the GK time and the dry wet to just sit tight and don't be too evasive, let's say. And then I have the bass stereo, which is exactly the same, but on the stereo I just add this has effect again. It's a preset that I've made for myself where I can straight away have this stereo effect, and that's our bass. And so now what I was talking about, the sub perc, that's without. I don't know, it's just kind of help, kind of make everything glued together. And yeah, it's a group, but it's just to make my life easier. There is absolutely no group processing. All right, and now let's talk about our synth. So this basically was the main idea, how I started the track. I have this rolling bass line with the kick. And then as I create my track during the live stream live, you know, I don't really have any idea where to go. It's just like depending on how I feel. And I couldn't really find a nice cutting edge lead at the beginning. And so what I was doing is creating a lot of elements here and there. So mainly brassy sound. So you can see here you have all of the horns and you have a donk, which are kind of classic sound. And until the end where I came out with this lead, so which is sound like this. And it's just a few notes. You can say like this track, there is not really like a kind of a main strong lead, but it's more like about all of these elements together as a whole main lead. I don't know if you get me, but that's how you have to see the things, and that's how everything has been built and why I pick up, because I had way much more element originally when I create. You can see on the live stream there is element that you cannot find here, and that's something I like to do, creating a lot of things, and sometimes I will just like get rid of them if they are not good enough. So here you can see, I will talk about it more in the arrangement, but you can see like element answering to each other. You can see you have the main lead and you always have like usually the horn playing right after. Here you can see it again. So it's just classic. Here the note again, you see it's G sharp and A, so it's just like one semitone at one octave upper, and Just a classic melody, but that does the job. And so the sound itself, you see there is not much process. I will show you how it's been made. So what does the trick here? You have the first oscillator, which is kind of with the vintage mini, I think it's from the Mini Moog probably filter wavetable. Is kind of a saw. There is a slight amount of FM, which kind of add a bit of harmonics. You know, if you just slightly add some FM, it just add harmonic without having this FM-ish metallic sound. And then you have a second oscillator, which is the same mini filter without the FM. Here the trick is to have detune one semitone. You're gonna hear it sound kind of boring. And here it's kind of sounds stressful. So this is the tips I said already I've made the video 5 wavetable tips. So go to check it out if you haven't. And having the detune as well here. So yeah, basically it's like if I was basically removing this and just putting 50. But yeah, it's probably I was experimenting. But yeah, these two waveforms are going through a low pass filter. You have this plucky effect. So you want something very sharp. The envelope, as you can see, if you want something plucky, no sustain, sharp decay. Same with the envelope, sharp decay. But you have a more sustain. So this way you still get the body of the sound. But obviously because of how the filter reacts to the envelope, you get just this plucky sharp sound. And you can see in the matrix, I have the filter modulated by the envelope too. And then after the more you go, the more it's gonna open the filter. There's just some EQ saturation. It's gonna get a little bit of grit, a bit of delay, to just make the tail a bit longer. And obviously the reverb have a very important role here. So usually for my lead, I will never go that much on the decay time, like to have a long reverb tail. But for this track, as it's just playing like 3 notes and then stopping, it's not a problem to have a long decay because you don't have like not playing over one of each other. And this way, you know, you're gonna add some reverb tail on top of one of each other. Every time you play a new note, a long reverb tail. So it can get really messy. Here you just have like few notes playing and then you can see you don't have it again playing. So you have the time of the reverb tail to fade out and it gets nice and clean. So that's why here I decided to choose a long reverb tail. So this way you sound in a lot of space, but it doesn't mess up your mix. Alright, and then you have lead bass, which is exactly the same. I just had this bright key because basically this one is playing all the time, and you have the bass one, which is just gonna play before the drop. And it's something I wanted to add a bit of snappiness and a bit of, I don't know, these little extra things just for the break, just before the drop. I use it after on the last part as well, but you can hear. It's just help.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as it were.
So yeah, so that was our main lead. Strangely, this one is basically the element that came out the last when I was creating the sound. It's like I've basically have created all of my elements. The reason why is because I was working on my own and I knew that I needed a lead and I knew more or less even before where to place it. But I just created it on the last because I kind of struggled to come out with an idea. And I say, okay, let me build the rest of the track. So I built all of the horn, I built the synth, I built the donk, I used the vocal. And then on the last, I was looking for a lead and I kind of find one quickly. When I decided to left it for the end, you know, I kind of find it quickly and I say, okay, that's the one. And because I spent, even in the live stream, I spent some time finding a lead, couldn't find something, you know, and it's the first time that I work this way, like having all of my second element, let's say, first, and then after creating the lead according to the second element. So that was quite interesting. Usually I will always work the other way around, like first having my main lead, my main idea, and then build the track around. But yeah, then there is this sense. So like we're gonna talk about it soon, but you have all of these horn effects, which have kind of low brassy sound. You can hear here. And like I said, you know, usually it's answer a response, you know, with the lead. And I wanted something like to answer with the lead, but more in the high frequency, and something as well which gonna add a bit of tension, again, in the high frequency, not with like something brassy. So I've got this kind of weird sound. kind of a cinematic vibe a little bit, you see. And let me show you how I made that. So quite simple patch. You have basically a triangle that I use FM modulation. And you can hear there is already some pitch modulation. I will come back to it later, but FM kind of make it a little bit even more weird. Sub, it's just add a bit of character. And here, because you want this cinematic kind of effect and slow attack, so you want to go to your amp and put the attack at 1 second. So this way you don't have the sound straight away coming in your face. You know, it's something like with a fade in. And this usually when you add a lot of reverb, it's work very well, what I'm gonna do now. So again, here, you want it to place in a big space, so quite a strong amount of dry wet and a long decay. And straight away you get this kind of cinematic feeling. Now you hear kind of pitch bend, and there is actually a pitch bend. So if you go there, you can see that on the end you have it's going down, but because of the sound, you're gonna see. Because of the sound, I have a very long release. The pitch down is kind of affecting the release actually, rather than the original of the sound. I don't know, it just creates this weird vibe, this tension. And then this phaser effect is more like kind of an enhancer. It's a preset I created. I couldn't honestly explain it to you exactly why it makes the sound better. I don't know, it's just work well. Saturation, add a bit of grit, delay. And yeah, and then utility is just to have a bit wider stereo. So then in terms of MIDI note, again G sharp and A, each note at a different octave. So here I've done A and G sharp, and then there is another one as well, variation here more like. But again, the same note, just like different octave, different combination. And so that's what add tension and variation. Initially, I used it mainly for the break, but then I decided to use it actually for a little bit all of the track. Actually, you can see I use it quite often. It's just like.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same.
And yeah, because initially I wanted to make the lead answer just the horn, but then I found it like too repetitive, and I wanted sometimes to don't have the horn answer to the lead. You see, to this melody. I will usually put a horn, and I say, okay, that's too much, so I'm gonna add a high element, so I use that as well for that. And I always try to have variation, to don't have the same 2-note playing or 3-note playing the time, you know, it's like you have 3-note, 2-note high, 3-note, 2-note low, 2-note high, you know, like always trying to change, you know, like this, it's not too repetitive. And yeah, now let's talk about the horn. So the horn, basically they are more or less in terms of sound design very similar. You can just hear. They obviously all have their own color, but so let me show you how I made the first one. So basically the best way to make kind of brassy sound is to use sawtooth. And you can see here, I use the vintage OB6, and I've done the same trick here. I've detuned one semitone. And obviously it's creating this weird phase, which kind of add a bit of stress and tension, which is really nice. And you have the filter opening, and obviously the unison here is a big part. Both actually, but detune and classic sawtooth, a bit of detune, a bit of unison. And then you got your sound, just you have to add a bit of reverb then. One thing which is very important for this kind of brassy is EQ, and especially the low cut. So you're gonna see. Okay, here's more or less the same. I just boosted it a bit here. Now when I add the filter, is what's gonna give really the character. Maybe if I what really gives this nice growling effect. So here I haven't accentuated too much, but yeah, usually EQ in combination of saturation really give a lot of color. We're gonna see on some other elements as well. You can have a basic sound here on your wavetable, but then adding a crunchy saturation with a nice low cut, with a bit of resonance on your low cut, and with a reverb behind, and you get usually a nice tone. Yeah, the sound itself is just like a nothing special. Then you have this one, which is exactly the same. You can see more or less the same patch. The only thing we change is the attack. This one is like straight away starting. You can see the attack is at 0 here and at 0 at 1 millisecond here, rather than this one. The attack of the amplitude was a bit slower, but otherwise it's the same patch, and the filter is gonna be a bit more open straight away. So this one I've used it just mainly for the last drop you see, and this last part. It's same reason than the lead beast. Basically, it's like sometimes to kind of create some dynamic, like having this extra accent at this specific part of the track. And you could do like automation, or you could find a way to do it the same with the same track, but you know, it's just easier to duplicate, open a bit more the filter, and job is done basically. That's what I've done here, and that's what I've done for the leads as well. Right, and then we have horn 2. And here again, you're gonna see EQ plus saturation, how it's gonna shape really the sound. So here again, two sawtooths. They are not detuned one of each other this time, but you have still the unison. So here's classic sawtooth, and then with the again having this filter fastly modulated by an envelope. Then after, it really depends how you want it. So you shape it differently. Here I put the attack at 60 milliseconds, so you get this kind of brassy, fluty effect. And then again, look, I'm gonna put the saturation, reverb. Okay, now just see how just the low cuts change. For me, it's day and night. It's like straight away add way much more character, way much more crunchiness. I don't know, it's just give it guts. Then, yeah, like I said, you can even go a little bit more with the resonance, but you see how we just change the frequency and it's gonna kind of give us a different tone. So that's something you can play with, create different kind of feeling. Then we have horn 3. So horn 3, I use my horn mode rack. And you see here it's modulated a little bit more than the other, where after it's playing like more kind of classic, and I use it for the break as well. Oh yes, I didn't show the notes, but they are always like G sharp, I think. It's basically a classic one note, yeah, G sharp, and then after it really depends. Yeah, G sharp, G0. And here as well G sharp. But yeah, I'm not gonna go into detail into my horn rack, but it's basically the same principle than usual. You see, you have your waveform with some unison, and then it's first like some heavy processing. Here I use a bandpass filter, so it kind of give a different tone than the classic horn that I really do. But yeah, the idea is the same, you know, than the previous one. Is just like some sounding a bit different. And then I use for the last one, I use the preset actually because I was kind of running out of idea for horn sound, and I just used one of my presets from my wavetable, Techno Bank 2. And again, this one you see is opening a little bit more, have a bit more variation. The other one are more like a steady, straight in the face brace sound. This one is more like a... The filter is opening slowly here. You can see here the attack is 1 second, which is modulating the filter here. So yeah, and then after it's the same, it's always saturator. So here I've used the wave shaper for the preset, but then EQ, delay, reverb. So this is exactly the same. I'm not gonna re-explain again how I said, because it's basically the same for all of the presets. Then we have our Donk. So this is a classic techno sound that you have probably heard 10,000 times. So I didn't make it play too long, but I just added like it's playing just 5 times during the whole track, but it's just add a bit of so here it's a square waveform with a strong resonance, kind of could be like an acid sound almost if you add a certain type of distortion, and plucky sound. You see, you want your filter to move fast, and because of the resonance as well and the drive and the fact that you use the square waveform at a low frequency, it kind of creating this tone. And then again, if you add saturation, it sounds like this, a bit of reverb. And again, a long reverb, it's not something that's gonna play a lot, so you can put a long reverb with a long decay, because again, not gonna be one note after another, which gonna kind of create this infinite tail, very messy. And then an EQ, which gonna change everything. Again, if you change the frequency, I guess you really get different tone. So then after, it's just a matter of taste, what you prefer. And this is like, yeah, it's just playing here and there. Like sometimes I didn't want it to play a horn, I didn't want it to play the high pad frequency. So I say, okay, let's add this here and there. It's just like kind of a, let's see, as a substitute. Like if you're having a football team, is, you know, the guy like at the end of the game substitute, like to leaving the other synth to rest a little bit. Then we have vocal. So basically this track have been heavily inspired by a track from Leighton Jordani. I don't remember the name of the track. It's one of his recent tracks from his album. And even the arrangement is actually is basically almost the same than his track. And it's just like, I wanted to take something scientific, something like this. So I use like basically the original sample. It's a speech from Leonardo DiCaprio, basically about climate change. And I think he's in the court. I don't remember exactly, but it's just like,
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, as if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now.
So the quality is not that wow, especially I repeat from YouTube, and especially it's been recorded with the whole room and stuff like that. But this is where Ableton is a bit limited, especially to treat like some vocal. I would love to have like something like Isotope and the Eric suit, like to kind of process it a little bit better. But yeah, I use the DSR preset.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same.
Bright Kit, my corpus preset, is just basically enhancing the high frequency. It's a resonator basically. And then there is a strong EQ.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate.
So there is a very sharp bed here. It's just because there is.
I believe that mankind has looked.
Because of the recording, there is this kind of buzzy frequency that I wanted to remove. And then I just tried to kind of boost the frequency I found was good or bad. Here I kind of cut it because it's kind of the S sound like this, which are annoying. So I kind of reduce it.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if.
And then I wanted to drum boost just to compress everything.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way.
On the end, it's kind of get this kind of pitch vibe, you know, where it's this old microphone, like this old political man and woman who was giving speech. And you got this kind of weird microphone settings vibes. So that's what I was trying to achieve as well.
I believe that mankind is.
Because obviously you don't have a good quality of recording, so it's no point to trying to have something super clean and perfect because you're gonna struggle. It's better to kind of make it feel like it was an old recording.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change.
If I wasn't telling you that it was DiCaprio, you wouldn't have probably recognized. I mean, I wouldn't have. So.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, as if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction.
To be honest, I'm not an expert at processing voice. I've never used voice in my track, so I kind of try my best to make it sound and fit the track the best. And the long reverb.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate.
Again, to kind of give this old speeches vibe. So, and then in the rest of the track is kind of sounding okay, everything together. So.
I believe that mankind has looked at climate change in that same way, as if it were a fiction, As if pretending that climate change wasn't real would somehow make it go away. But I think we all know better than that now.
And again, during the second break, it's exactly the same phrase, it's exactly the same pitch. In the original track from later on, Jordan, it I said that I was inspired by, it's exactly the same things happening, it's the same vocal repeating. And it's fine because like this it doesn't get too much, it doesn't get too cheesy neither. So let's move into the SFX. So here SFX is mainly for transition. Usually this kind of techno, you have a bit more SFX than usual. First thing, the rising, for example, this is something that I will never use in one of my tracks, but this that I've put it. What it is basically, you can see it's like kind of a super saw detune unison synth low, but you can see there is this pitch evolving. I've done this with the LFO basically, because basically this is one of my trancy lead rack. Again, if you want to find out more, we put it in the description, but I've used it in a different way. I've added the LFO with a very slow rate, and you see the shape usually by default is like this triangle, but if you put at 100%, you have this saw up. So at a slow rate, it's gonna, if you decide to modulate the pitch like I've done here in the matrix, it's gonna slowly modulate the pitch up and up and up, like kind of an infinite way. So here's what it does, and it keeps more going up, and I've automated the filter as well to kind of slightly open. But I just wanted something subtle in the background, you know, like I didn't want something too much in the face, but so yeah, again, if you want to find out more about the lead, I will put the link in the description. It's a classic super so trancy lead. So then you have this horn 1 SFX. So this is something interesting. Basically, I've taken the horn 1, it's exactly the same sound. So the horn 1, you can hear it here, and this is the SFX version of it. So usually what I will do is I will take this synth and I will freeze and flatten, and I will shorten it, reverse it, and I will put it like this. But here I didn't want it to do that because for the sake of this tutorial, it was better to have the original file. So I say, okay, let's sync differently. And the way to do that, instead of having a reverse, it's basically having a slower attack. So this way you get this like, this woof effect. And with a short decay as well, so it's not something too long, it's just like a very sharp sound, but instead of very percussive, it's kind of this aspiration effect. And this just before a new bar loop, a new bar section, it works just so well. And you're gonna hear how it, and without, see, it adds this. This is basically the same technique that you might do this sometimes with your clap or with your snare. You know, you will have a reverse version of the same sample just right before the hit, and that's exactly the same idea, is having this reverse synth just before the kick, and it just gives this nice snappy things. So the preset, the sound is exactly the same. I'm not gonna go again in detail. It's just like I said, the attack and the decay, which are shaped differently to have this kind of aspiration effect, but very sharp. So aspiration effect is made with using longer attack, and the sharp effect is made by the shorter decay. So long attack, short decay, you get this kind of vibe. Then you have hats SFX. So here what I've done is I took the open hats from my rack here, from my track, and I just put it in the sampler and reverse it and play it. It's as easy as that. And here I've cut the gain, but sometimes I will leave it, because here I didn't want it the noisy tail. Sometimes I want, sometimes no. So that's what I've done that. But yeah, it's just a reverse sample. That's worked well. Another way to do it, it's basically to put your hat into a lot of reverb. And so then you have like a kind of a long sample, noisy sample with a lot of reverb, and you reverse it. And that's exactly what I've done here. You can see here I have this. But this originally was this sample here, but obviously I bring down this, and basically this is your hats into a lot of reverb. So usually what I will do is you click just on reverse here, and obviously here you have to be careful with the fade. Okay, but then you have your reverse exactly the same than this one. So here you barely see it because I wanted this aspiration effect, but I didn't want it to have a too strong tail, you know, like just very slight. I didn't want it something too noisy because again, after it gets messy and it wasn't really working well for this track. But yeah, that's how I've done this one. And here I add a bit of process. So you have the EQ, which is like kind of creating this effect. The flanger as well add a bit of modulation because of the LFO. Kind of having this filtering effect as well, and the stereo width just make it stereo. And then we have this noise SFX, which is, this one is quite interesting. I've usually mainly used it for the breakdown, because for this breakdown I wanted this noise which is constantly playing and going upper and upper and upper, which is gonna be tension. That's exactly what it does here. You see it's gonna go up and up. So there is different way to do that. You could have just used like operator, you could have, I wanted to use something different a little, and as you can see there is a bit of process. I might have overcomplicated myself, but here what I've done is I use echo, and you have a noise basically in echo, and I took this noise, add pedal to add character, filter it the first time, add a bit of redux to kind of make it very granular. That's why I add this redux. And yeah, you have to, that's annoying, you have to deactivate. And then another EQ. So you might wonder why I have two EQ. Basically, probably because initially I wanted to modulate like this. So that's why I put this EQ. But on the end I didn't modulate, and so I leave it because it was sounding good. And then you have gain is just to automate, obviously, because you don't want to have your noise continuously playing the whole track. You want to be able to modulate that or cut it when you don't need it for the other part of your track. And then you have some reverb. So you can see here you fade in. So basically here what you do, it's you manually create what I've created here, like, you know, with having a fade in and then after a fade out here like this. It's creating your own. I could have used operator again, but I wanted to use echo just to have a different kind of noise. And then you have this gain as well, which is kind of sometimes, for example, here I don't want the tail of the reverb or stuff like that, so I'm gonna automate it. So you see, this way I don't have the long tail, rather than, for example, here, I'm gonna have the tail. You see here I have the tail of the reverb. And here I have the gain here because, again, I don't want to have the noise too continuous. I want to stop it straight away. So that's why there is this automation here. Then we have our mixdown track. So here is just a low cut. So usually for the break or just before a new bar, you see like sometimes it's nice to add this low cut. Just work well, help the transition, add a bit more dynamic. And then this riser, this is kind of a washout effect rack. Again, I put the link in the description. It's like delay, you send your sound into a lot of delay and reverb. And I've used it here, but very slightly. You're gonna see it's not crazy.
I believe that mankind.
This is very like a gentle effect. It's not crazy. Usually you can go even more crazy like this. But you see it's going until here. And it's not a very deep effect. It's just like a little bit, just to add a bit of tension, but without going too much crazy and to just being subtle. And then I have my two returns. So this is, I've used them mainly for my hats. I usually send this hat on the return because it's kind of add, the same I did on the riser effect. You know, it's kind of adding a lot of reverb and delay and this kind of noisiness. And it's help with the transition, it's help building tension, because when you send your hats during the, for example, the break, it's gonna add some noise and more noise. Basically, it's gonna do something similar than what it does here, like having this noise constantly growing, and so it's getting noisier and noisier, and it's add a bit of tension. That's what it does. So one is one of my rack, one is a rack from Make It Transition. It's another YouTube channel. I recommend to go to check it out. And it just does that. It's just like reverb. You can see reverb and compression. I said, no, even just reverb. Just work well. You send your sound there and it adds a nice things, and then the master. All right, and that's pretty much it in terms of sound design and how things are going together. I will talk a bit more next week about the arrangement and about the mixing and the mastering, how elements interact with each other. And yeah, if you like the template, if you like the project, if you want to grab it, it's a great way to support me. Link in the description. I hope you like this video. I hope you like some new stuff. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.